My name is Emily Callahan, although many people call me Callie. I am an ER nurse by trade, a humanitarian by heart, and I came home from Gaza on November 4th after spending 26 days trapped in a war zone. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to say today. I know I wanted to talk about the beauty of the Palestinian people who saved my life, and this is also a church thing, so I wanted to loop in God and prayer and finding humanity. But to be honest, I have no idea what to say or where to start. So I'm going to start before Gaza. I spent a year in South Sudan with MSF prior to my mission in Gaza. One morning in the ICU, we were working on a baby girl who was not doing well. She was emaciated and sick, and then the nurse I was with and the baby's mother started speaking in Nuer, and I couldn't understand anything, so I walked back over to the nurse's station. When he was done, I asked the nurse what the mother had said. He told me, she said she thinks the baby must have done something terrible for God to have given her this life. Where do you find God in South Sudan, in Gaza? Where is God for the 13-year-old girl sold to her middle-aged husband destined to bear children and die of malaria or HIV? Where is God when you wake your children in the middle of the night under threats of bombs and run into the streets only to realize that there is nowhere to go? I realized in that moment in the ICU in South Sudan that my belief in God had been based on what I had been given. God suddenly felt nestled into the opportunities of privilege. Oh, yes, I experienced this pain, but it brought me this job, this opportunity, this person, or this joy I couldn't have found if I hadn't gone through what I did. But what does it mean if a person is born into a world without any of those things? A person is born into unspeakable poverty and war and has suffered unbearable loss, but they maintained their faith and what? Stayed poor, died of disease, became buried under the rubble of what used to be their home. Where does my God fit in there? A vengeful God seems to exist only in areas of poverty and hopelessness. A benevolent God for those of us with means. Human suffering is outside of God when God provides. Human suffering is the hand of God when life is relentlessly punishing. If the foundation of my beliefs is based in the blessings I have received, then is it really faith or is it just gratitude? How do you reconcile God and more? So I reworked my understanding of God and realized that God made man in his likeness has nothing to do with how we look. The pool of the wisdom of humanity is all of humanity, and God is the best parts of that collective. God's likeness is the God inside of us that transcends circumstance. My favorite line of all time is from the finale of Les Miserables. To love another person is to see the face of God. The closest I ever feel to God is in the unspeakable. The places in your soul unreachable by language, the places where there are no words. In love that defies explanation and in visceral pain. In the way music makes you feel. The connection of soul, the phrase, I see you, the silence of just knowing. We connect usually through language, but what happens when language can't reach the depths of the experience? When you can't find words for the indescribable? That is where you find God. God exists in the indescribable in all of us, and choosing to live a life with enough humility to allow for all human connection is an act of prayer. It took me a long time to find God, but it took Gaza for me to find faith. Faith, as it has become for me, is a verb. It is an action and not a state of mind. It is not blind belief, but active seeking. Human experience in the extreme is isolating. In the throes of war, in the emaciation of famine, in paramount loss, there are no words. Making decisions is an act of faith. In Gaza, I was faced with impossible choices. 3 days before the war started, we got a phone call. Apparently, there was a rumor going around that I had been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I hadn't, to be clear, but the rumor gained enough traction for it to work its way up to the higher levels of the Hamas government. 3 days before the war started, Hamas called the hospital administration and asked about Callie, the American nurse, and why she was where she was. Our contacts within that government called my boss at MSF, told him what happened, and that they are keeping a very close eye on me. 3 days later, they launched their horrific attack on Israel. The day unfolded, and we heard about assaults by land, air, and sea, and about the festival and hostages. The U.S. publicly pledged their loyalty to Israel, and there are members of Hamas who 3 days ago thought I was an American spy. I didn't sleep. If they come for me, do I hide? Will they kill my whole team trying to get to me? Will they kill everyone and find me anyway? Or do I go with them willingly and try and save my team? I decided, if it came down to it, I would go. At KYTC, we were surrounded by 35,000 displaced people, and they kept asking us where we were from. Do I tell them that I'm an American? If there are informants or people with military connections, would they turn me over? If their anger builds enough, will they kill me as an example? Will they celebrate revenge? Or are they just curious? If I lie and they figure out that I'm lying, will they think I'm lying because I am a spy? And will it solidify their desire to take their rage out on me? Or will they realize I had lied because I am scared? And will they understand that? I chose to lie. After 20 days of living in a parking lot at a UN logistics base, the situation became dangerous. Our friend in the UN told us that if we didn't leave by sunrise, we were probably going to die, as he unpacked bulletproof vests and helmets for himself and his colleagues. We then are told that only 24 of us have permission to go to the house we had found near the coast. We'd have to leave behind 18 people. All parties to the conflict had agreed to allow the 24 people from MSF to move, but that was all. If we brought the others with us and we were stopped, it could mean we all die. It could mean they die. If we brought the others with us and whatever party found out, they would deem us untrustworthy at best and treacherous at worst, and it could jeopardize our permission to cross the border. It could set back negotiations to open Rafah by weeks. If we didn't bring them with us, they would die. Only 4 of us knew what was going on, and how do we make that decision? Do we potentially sacrifice our own lives? And if we are okay with that, what about the other 20 people who would have otherwise been safe? Are we okay sacrificing their lives? The situation in Gaza is deteriorating, and food is dwindling, and there is no fuel for water trucks. If negotiations are set back because we disobeyed one of the parties and we can't cross the border for weeks, will we all survive that long? But how do we leave our friends behind to die? The next morning, as we were packing the cars, my boss asked me if I'm going to tell them to leave half the stuff behind for the people not coming. I told him if we were leaving them behind, he could tell them because I can't. Neither of us could do it. We said nothing as we all drove off in the convoy and prayed to every God we had ever heard of that we wouldn't be killed for it. Impossible choices are made when you talk to the piece of you that language cannot reach. I asked it, can I live with myself if I make this call? I asked, is this the right thing to do? I asked the indescribable pain underneath the consequences of choice, which pain can I live with? Faith is the act of making decisions. Faith is choosing to put myself in the equation. Food was scarce. In the beginning, there were local restaurants that were still operating. The bombs and rockets were launching and landing 50 to 100 meters from the parking lot we slept in, and all of southern Gaza was being hit daily and relentlessly. There was no safe place in Gaza. How do we ask our fiercely loyal Palestinian staff to drive through bombs to bring us food or supplies? How do you forgive yourself if they die doing it? But we were dying, and we didn't have enough food to live. How do you put yourself in that equation? Before the restaurant shut down, our Palestinian staff would help us arrange delivery of chicken and rice. I always made sure I ate last. By then, there was usually no more chicken and maybe a cupful of rice. When all we had was canned tuna and beans and shelf-stable cheese, I took no more than 2 spoonfuls of each to make sure there was enough for the others. When we used what we had and cooked hot food over an open fire, I wanted to make sure there was enough for the other people. The plates they would come up with were actually delicious. And I would drool from afar as people filled up, and I took whatever dregs were left in the bottom of the pot, if any. I can survive on less. I can eat less. Rockets launched from just over the barbed wire wall, and the retaliation bombs followed quickly, and MSF and governments and militaries are making decisions to protect their own agendas, and I remember wanting to scream at the sky, "We matter too." And that was finding faith. Why am I not eating? I believed that having needs made me weak. Thriving on less made me more powerful than needing anything. I believed that I needed to give more to other people merely because I could give more. If I could give more, even if it broke me, I should give it. I can handle it. I should give everything I have, even if it kills me in the process, because I can make myself be okay with less than what I need. Except I was dying in the process, and I matter too. Does my loyalty, my self-sacrifice, my giving, my love, strong enough to be willing to die for it, make me as faithful as a saint or as faithful as a suicide bomber? Self-sacrifice, when it's wrapped in the good intentions of saving other people, denies me connection to what makes me human. If I twist myself into a pretzel trying to be what I think other people need from me, trying to be okay with less than I need, I lose access to everything about me that makes me real. It stops me from being able to feel. And if God is in indescribable emotions and in the feelings of the experiences of the soul, I am denying myself access to God. And in denying myself access to my God, I cannot find human connection with the God in you. We would sometimes get bananas, and they would go very quickly. I started to tell myself it was okay to take one too. Faith is allowing myself to sleep. Faith is allowing myself to eat. Faith is putting myself into the equation and not just being or giving what other people need from me and surviving on less, even if I can. Faith is bearing witness. Maybe that is the point of to understand rather than be understood. When holding the hand of the mother whose baby is taking its final breath, to be understood is to search for other people who have held similar hands and know what it's like. I wiped dead skin off the burn on a child's face. I taught a sobbing daughter how to give her elderly mother injections. I saw more dead kids than any human should ever see. I held the hand of Tarek as he wept after 25 members of his family were killed. I listened to Jimmy cry as he buckled under the responsibility of his extended family, over 20 of them children asleep on the street. Desperation is not a strong enough word to describe heartbroken civilians in a war zone. To understand is to tap into your own unspeakable, your own grief and anger and heartbreak, and allowing yourself to identify. A willingness to experience the depths of your own pain, to give connection to the isolation of indescribable extremes. To understand is to bear witness without distance, embracing the unspeakable instead of holding it at arm's length. To understand is to be the knowing silence, to be the one to say, "I see you," to be the source of the wave of relief in another who finally feels like they aren't alone. To be understood is to seek connection, to seek God. To understand is to be the raw vulnerability of wordless connection, to be of God. I think we probably need both. I don't think you can be the connection for someone else unless you have sought and found your own. Perhaps the prayer of human connection is simply asking to be of God more often than we look for God. It's asking ourselves to access the feeling of God, to look for points of identification not only for our own development of faith, but to also be the source of faith for others. Faith is choosing to lower our defenses and allowing the darkest parts of yourself to give light to someone else. And the harder part of that faith is to allow others to do it for you. Faith is bearing witness. The largest commonality I have found in the depths of senseless loss is blame. I have worked in 5 ERs across the US and several more across 4 countries. In a world of division and hatred, death as a consequence of man's inhumanity to man sends shockwaves through everyone forced to bear witness. I've blamed parents and spouses and friends. I have blamed society for suicides and broken systems for preventable loss. We get angry first. We point fingers. It is easier to sit self-righteously in the black and white of who is at fault than to exist in a world of pain we can't make sense of. It is easier to bottle that pain into an anecdote of anger and to load it into the guns of hatred, plunging into the abyss of vigilante justice. It feels better in the immediate moment to set the world on fire and watch it burn in the dark hope that others will feel a fraction of your loneliness in a life that no longer makes sense. To make the world pay for your broken heart. Justice feels like the only solution to loss. It feels impossible to carry the weight of helplessness and unspeakable pain. But it is the easy choice to allow fear to transform you into a monster. It is the easy choice to allow the ignorance of black and white thinking to dictate your hatred. It is the easy choice to hide behind blame. It is so much harder to choose to move past the satisfaction of self-righteousness and into empathy. It is the harder choice to see brotherhood in the blindness of rage. Faith is digging deeper. I cannot and will not speak for all of Gaza or Palestinians. They have their own voices, perspectives, and stories that deserve to be told by them. What I can do is speak to the humanity I watched rise above hatred. Humanity that rages on in every corner of the earth shattered by violence. I have been to enough places, seen enough of hell, to know that the human spirit in all of its resilience exists everywhere. I know that there will always be people on every side of every conflict that quietly carry the torch of faith because I have seen it. My experiences, the stories I have, the things I saw, are isolated to the communities in which I lived, and I have not been to every corner of the earth, but I know it is there. For me, I can talk about the beauty of civilians who I saw make the harder choice to do the right thing, and not the easy thing. I can talk about the people who set the example for me, who showed me that it is possible to remain human in the inhumane. While our survival hung in the balance of negotiations and war room briefings, it was civilians that kept us fed. While brass-laden leaders dug in their heels, it was civilians that got us water. While political agendas pushed the buttons launching destructive artillery, it was civilians that demonstrated humanity. They dug deeper than their anger and emerged as angels. To remain good in the face of evil is heroism. Tarek lost 25 members of his family in one airstrike and came to KYTC with tears in his eyes to make sure we had gotten south of the Wadi Gaza line safely. Sharkari was beaten while he slept over a tarp and drove through raucous and the airstrikes the next day, appearing before us with a black eye and a gash to his cheek and hygiene supplies for us in his hands. Every other day, Jimmy leaves his family of 35 to make sure there is someone with us so we feel protected and cared for. Taher makes coffee over an open fire as we all sit together, exhausted. Ibrahim shoved his way through crowds to get us through Rafah, only to lose his father and his brother that night. Heroism looks like Dr. Shaban at Indonesia Hospital in North Gaza, who said, "We trust in God, and if we have to die, it is a shame to die a coward." Fear is begging my nurses, my friends, my coworkers to grab their families and run as far and as fast as they can. Heroism is the reply. We will not leave our community to die alone. If we die, we will die saving as many people as possible. Heroism is our Palestinian staff who knew that my country, my tax dollars, and my government were funding a military who was killing their families and choosing to love and protect me anyway. Faith is digging deeper and coming into the God voice inside of you. That part is so much quieter than the extremes we tend to live in. I was staying at the UNDP building in Ramal before we moved south of Wadi Gaza. We found sidewalk chalk, and 50 kids and I started to decorate the driveway outside. If we are going to fight for normalcy in a bunker, then damn it, it will be a beautiful bunker. I will give them color, and smiles, and laughter, and dancing, and shouting, and love. Unapologetic, loud, energetic, selfless love. For you, I can stay. For you, I can give more, do more, push harder, and dig deeper. I had not eaten, and I was dizzy. I danced with a little girl, and another hugs my leg. I can feel my heart racing, and it is the intoxication of angels in the depths of hell. My vision blurs in colorful plumes of chalk dust. It is a familiar mix of rage and love driving my muscles as I spin a little boy in circles. I can't breathe because they are hugging me too tightly, and I can't protect them from pain and loss and mortal fear. I am spinning and I can't make it stop, and I am losing control of the too much. Too much of the feelings I can't hold on to long enough to identify. Too much I can't find language for. Too much and I can't stop it, but I can turn it into motivating anger. Color every paver in this driveway. Can you read our names from your drone? Draw faces on the walls under the barbed wire. Can you see the tiny chalk outlines of the bodies in your future crime scene? Orange flowers and blue peace signs and green hearts and purple palm trees. Can you feel my desperate anger through your border wall? That night we were informed that IDF was going to target the building we were sleeping in, and we had until morning to leave. Desperate Palestinians blocked us in and threatened to beat us to death with rocks and tire irons if we didn't take them with us. At 5 a.m., I was forced to come to terms with the fact that I was going to die. And even still, I didn't want to leave. In the extreme, my identity becomes personality traits that I am willing to die for. In the extreme, I put myself in situations that harm me in the name of love, loyalty, selflessness, and global responsibility. In the extreme, I realize how easy it is to become the monsters you fear when the line between good and evil is blurred by righteous indignation. What I am struggling with today is stillness. That God part inside of us is filled with truth that is sometimes excruciating. And if I run fast enough into the extremes of the world, I can bury that part in self-righteous purpose. If faithfulness is loyalty, then to be faithful to God is to be loyal to the God part inside of you. Finding purpose in quiet acts of kindness. If prayer is living a life of human connection to the God in us all, then the act of faith is choosing to allow that to be enough. Gaza was bombs and rubble and resounding grief and deafening silence. Gaza was impossible choices and life and death. Gaza was also taking the banana. Gaza was receiving Tahir's cup of coffee and holding Tarek's hand and humbling gratitude in letting other people show up for me. Gaza was finding the difference between selfishness and putting what I need into the equation. Gaza was being willing to die for my beliefs and self-important, ego-driven identity, and the realization that to do that is a slap in the face to all the quiet grace that inspired me to be there. Gaza was accepting God's will for me, whatever it may be, and Gaza was letting go. I am lucky enough to have found God all over the world in the raw of what I have chosen to do for a living. I am finding faith in making a decision to be vulnerable enough to move past the protective instinct of the extreme. Maybe the purpose of this life is to decide to continue to seek your faith.